everyone, it's your Sam Labs education team. We've got Emily Deffenbaugh, Mackenzie Meister, and Jennifer Byram here, and we are going to be talking about our upcoming webinar series that we would love to invite you to come join us about. So exciting, it's all about assessments in STEM or STEAM. So I'm going to hand it over to my teammates. We're going to do a quick introduction and then talk a little bit about what you can expect when you come and join us for our 2-week webinar series.
Hi everyone, this is Jennifer Byram. I am a senior education consultant along with Emily and Mackenzie, and I work closely with the Central and Southwestern regions. I'm so excited to be spending today talking with you about our Sam Labs STEAM assessments and our upcoming webinar, as this project has definitely become our little baby and something that we are super passionate about. So with that, I will hand it over to Mackenzie.
Hey everyone, Mackenzie Meister here. I am the Senior Education Consultant for Sam Labs on the East Coast. I'm a former teacher myself, taught middle school to elementary school all over the Northeast of the United States. And I was really excited to be working on the 4th and 5th grade assessments for our STEAM course. And I'll pass it to Emily.
Thanks, Mackenzie. And as you guys probably know, I'm Emily Deffenbaugh. I am the Senior Education Consultant for the Western portion of the United States. I also was a former educator and taught in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 4th grade. And I was lucky enough to be able to work on the kindergarten and 3rd grade assessments and leading those for our STEAM assessments that are coming up. So what we're going to do now is kind of dive into what the topic is going to be about for our webinar to try to pique your interest and see if this is something that you can relate to. And then again, hope that you will join us in our upcoming webinar. So to start off, we want to talk about what assessment is and the different types of assessment that you may utilize within your own classroom. And so we know that there are 3 different kinds. We've got diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments. So I'm going to give just a quick definition of what those are and maybe how they connect with each other. And then from there, we're going to take you on a little tour or a little roadmap of how we've utilized the summatives within our own courses. So diagnostics are just a quick check to see where your students are coming in with a specific skill or concept. Think of going to the doctor when you go get a checkup. They're just doing quick checks to see different levels, maybe blood pressure or checking your lungs, etc. But for a teacher, this means that you're typically doing this at the beginning of the year. So for example, a kindergarten teacher might do diagnostics with each individual student to check on letter sounds, letter identification, maybe phonemic awareness concepts. Older students, teachers might be, let's say, given math problems just to see where students are problem solving, the different strategies and tools that they use, and any misconceptions that they may have. So this helps the teacher just to see the snapshot of where your students are and their abilities. And that helps you as the teacher to sit with your students and really just kind of create a generalized action plan of setting goals and what steps you want them to work on to take to meet those goals. And that kind of leads into the formative. The formative assessments are used within that learning process. So those formatives help to provide feedback, not just to you, the teacher, but also to the students themselves, where their learning is in that process. And that can be through dialogue, it can be through projects, it can be through any kinds of assignments that are turned in. And these formative assessments can also be dialogues, just simply having those conversations back and forth between teacher and student. And most often they are ungraded because this is, again, just a quick check-in to see where their students are in the learning process. And as a teacher, you want to be able to take that knowledge and iterate your instruction based on that. So do you need to reform these flexible groups? Do you need to go back and reteach something? Or is it something where you realize you can challenge your students and push them ahead? And then finally, using what you've learned and what the students have learned from the formative assessments, at the end of units, we're going to head to the summative assessments, which means that the student is going to be evaluated on whether or not they've mastered the skill or concept within that learning process. So whether they fall far below, approach, meet, or even exceed the standard. And teachers are evaluating them against that specific benchmark of what you've been working on within that unit. So these are definitely more formal, and these are the ones that you are going to take as grades and input in the grade book. So now that I've done that very long but brief summary on the 3 different types of assessments, we're going to talk about which assessments we chose to focus on, and I'm going to hand it over to Jen.
Thanks, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, teachers work with lots of different types of assessments. And for our first kind of deep dive into creating these assessments for SAM Labs, we chose to focus our efforts on those formative assessments. So those quick checks that teachers can take at the end of each lesson to see how their students are progressing. And so this is a project that all of us are really passionate about, because each one of us, when we first jumped in at SAM Labs, realized that we offered these complete lesson packs, including the lesson plans, the slide decks, the student handouts, but we didn't have any way for our educators to actually assess their students' kind of learning and their success through that lesson. And so this is something that we've been kind of toying with for a while now, and we finally just kind of jumped right into looking at developing these formative assessments for teachers. So what we have been doing these past couple of months is developing these formative assessments to go along with each lesson plan within our STEAM course, with the intention of developing pre and post summative assessments in the near future, hopefully for back to school. One of the things that we really kind of took into consideration is how difficult assessment in STEAM is, and knowing that teachers usually don't have a good guidance on how to assess students through their STEAM projects or their STEAM assignments. So we worked really hard to be able to create these comprehensive formative assessments for teachers to quickly be able to provide to their students either at the end of each SAM Labs lesson or as a pre and post formative assessment to truly see where students are coming in prior to each STEAM lesson, prior to each STEAM assignment, and then also look at what growth happened at the end of each lesson to be able to compare from that. So as I mentioned, this is a project that all 3 of us are extremely excited and extremely passionate about. And we would love to be able to share with you the features that we are individually most excited about. And for that, I will let Mackenzie share what she is most excited about with these STEAM assessments.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen. So I think what's most amazing about our STEAM formative assessments is the versatility of each assessment from kindergarten to 5th grade. Each assessment is assessing science, engineering within that science standard, and then also the CSTA coding standards as well. And I think that it's just really important to be able to kind of formalize the assessment of coding. And I think through these formative assessments, we have achieved that. And we've achieved it in a way that students are now asked to kind of promote their higher order thinking within coding and STEAM and engineering as well. I think that also my favorite part is that it determines kind of where students are sitting in the progression of knowledge within STEAM and coding, right? We're able to see their factual understanding of knowledge, but also we're getting into the higher order thinking skills and a deep understanding of each science and coding concept within every formative assessment.
I think that's such a great point, Mackenzie. And I think it really goes back to what Emily highlighted as being the purpose of a formative assessment, is to just be a quick check to see where students are in their learning process, and knowing that all students are going to fall at a different stage of that progression or of that spectrum. And so these will hopefully really allow our teachers to see, are our students really just at the beginning concepts and just at, that factual basic knowledge, or are they able to dive a little bit deeper into each concept? Personally, I think my favorite aspect of each of these assessments is going to be the student misconceptions. So one thing that we noticed when we were really researching is the importance of each alternative answer choice for students, so each incorrect answer choice for students, to be something that would be believable, and so really highlighting a student misconception. And so all 3 of us worked really hard in making sure that we were really researching each science concept or coding concept or engineering concept that was being assessed, and looking at what those common student misconceptions are, and making sure that we included those student misconceptions into each answer choice, but more importantly, that we highlighted what those student misconceptions would be in the answer key. And so I think this is something that's going to be really powerful for educators, is the fact that they can administer this formative assessment and then compare student answers to the answer key and automatically know what misconception their students have or the lack of background knowledge that students may be coming in with. And so if they're using this as a pre-assessment, they can go ahead going into the lesson knowing where their students are at, what misconceptions they have, so they can break those misconceptions within the lesson or make sure that they're not playing into those misconceptions. Or if they're doing it as a post-formative assessment, they can look at, well, is there any way that I played into any of those misconceptions within the lesson that maybe students didn't come in with? Or what other information do I need to go back and review with my students? What other learning experiences do I need to provide to my students to make sure that we correct those misconceptions before moving forward? So I think that's going to be a really powerful tool for our teachers as they start to utilize these assessments.
Yeah, Jen, I absolutely love the fact that we added the misconceptions in there, because it, again, is going to be a powerful tool for teachers to be able to utilize in a way that makes most sense for them, whether it's the pre or the post, or even doing both pre and post a formative assessment. I also want to go back to Mackenzie's point very quickly on the idea of it being formalized and assessing both the CSTA as well as the NGSS standards, and the fact that students are going to be able to show their progress within both of those realms, and also looking at that higher order thinking. I think it's so important to see where students are actually applying that knowledge. And a lot of the questions that we have embedded within the different grade levels are going to give them a chance to actually do that. So you can see if they're on the lower end of just identifying and defining versus really looking and seeing if they're able to do the analysis and the synthesis and the creation. And that's such an important part. So I love both of those points. So thank you guys for sharing. The one thing I did want to mention that is a little bit different perhaps than what other assessments offer out there is we did a lot of research to ensure that our assessments were also developmentally appropriate. So for our kindergarten first grade pack, that's going to obviously look a lot different from what our fourth and fifth graders are going to see. The fonts are a lot bigger, the answer choices are very visual. There are teacher instruction guides to go along with the kindergarten and first grade formatives. There are little images on the left side of each question, so students are easily able to track the questions as you go. And we wanted to make sure, depending on their age, that the question levels were appropriate. So making sure that there were a small amount of questions on all of the different assessments, whether they were in kindergarten all the way up through fifth grade. So just keeping in mind that we were aware of that and wanted to construct these assessments in a way that makes sense for the grade level that we are teaching with. So love that they're developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, awesome. And I couldn't have said it better myself, Emily. So we're going to leave you guys with that, and we are going to invite you to our webinar on the STEAM assessments that we've created for our STEAM course. And the webinar is going to be on April 22nd. So we hope you're able to make it. We're going to go through the process that we went to research and develop these formative assessments. We're going to discuss why we chose Bloom's taxonomy, how we are adapting these formatives for the different grade levels from kindergarten to fifth, the different thought processes that we brought in, and then ultimately that developmentally appropriate test structure. We'll also go through the assessment framework, how they're aligned to NGSS and CSTA standards, and then we'll discuss the usability in the classroom. So what does it actually look like to use the answer key or take those misconceptions and reteach a lesson? So we hope that you'll join us on April 22nd, and thanks for joining today.